You knew what a mortgage was before you knew what a curfew felt like. You learned to read the room before you learned to read chapter books. While other kids were worrying about homework, you were worrying about whether your mother was okay, whether your father was coming home, whether the electricity would stay on this month. You weren't told to carry this. Nobody handed you a job description. You just looked around one day, noticed that nobody was holding things together, and quietly stepped into the role yourself. And the strangest part isn't that you did it, it's that nobody ever acknowledged it. You were called mature, responsible, the good one, the strong one, and you wore those words like badges without realizing they were actually receipts, proof that you were doing a job that was never supposed to be yours. Here's what nobody tells you about growing up too fast. It isn't something you chose. Psychologically, it is a specific developmental disruption called parentification, and its effects don't end when you leave that house. They follow you into every relationship, every job, and every quiet moment where you wonder why you can't stop taking care of everyone. By the end of this, the exhaustion you've been carrying since childhood is going to finally have a name. Let's start with what this looked like, because from the outside, a parentified child doesn't look like a child in crisis. They look like an exceptionally good kid, the one teachers loved, the one relatives praised, the one who never caused trouble, never needed reminding, never fell apart in public. And that appearance, that performance of competence, was the whole point. It was survival camouflage. Looking capable meant nobody would look too closely at what was happening at home. Maybe you were the one who cooked dinner because no one else was going to. Maybe you were the one who got your younger siblings ready for school while your parents were absent, physically or emotionally. Maybe you were the emotional container for a parent who treated you more like a therapist than a child, telling you about their problems, their fears, their relationship issues, their money struggles. You sat and listened and held their pain because you understood, even at 8 or 9 years old, that if you didn't hold it, nobody would. And if nobody held it, everything would collapse. But there's another layer most people don't notice, because it wasn't just the tasks, it was the identity that formed around them. You didn't just do adult things, you became an adult inside. Your childhood wasn't taken from you in one dramatic moment. It was replaced, slowly, silently, task by task, by a sense of responsibility that had no off switch. And by the time you were old enough to realize what had happened, the replacement was complete. You didn't know how to be a child anymore. You had forgotten how to need things, how to be messy, how to be irresponsible, how to let someone else worry. Those parts of you had been shut down so early that they felt like they never existed at all. And this is where it connects to something deeper. Because parentification is not just a childhood experience, it is a developmental disruption that reshapes how the brain processes identity, attachment, and self-worth. Dr. Gregory Jurkovic, who pioneered research on parentification at Georgia State University, identified 2 forms. Instrumental parentification is when a child takes on physical tasks, cooking, cleaning, managing the household, caring for siblings. Emotional parentification is when a child becomes the emotional caretaker, listening to a parent's problems, mediating conflicts between adults, managing the emotional atmosphere of the home. Both forms share the same core disruption. The child's developmental needs are subordinated to the parent's needs. Instead of being held, they hold. Instead of being protected, they protect. The hierarchy flips, and the child learns the lesson that will follow them for the rest of their life. My needs come last. My job is to take care of everyone else first. We'll come back to why this lesson is almost impossible to unlearn, because the reason it sticks has to do with how deeply it wires into the nervous system during the developmental window when it was installed. But first, the mechanism. Because the reason parentified children become parentified adults isn't just habit, it's neurological architecture. During childhood development, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for planning, decision-making, and emotional regulation, is shaped by experience. In a typical developmental trajectory, the child's prefrontal cortex matures gradually, while the adults around them handle the complex planning and emotional processing. The child's job is to play, explore, make mistakes, and be protected while doing it. But in a parentified child, the prefrontal cortex is forced into overdrive years ahead of schedule. It starts handling planning, emotional regulation for others, household logistics, and social management during a period when it should still be developing. Research on early adversity and brain development, including work by Dr. Martin Teicher at Harvard, has shown that children who take on adult responsibilities prematurely show measurable differences in brain structure, particularly in regions associated with threat detection and emotional processing. Their brains mature faster in some areas and slower in others. They become hyper-competent at managing external situations and underdeveloped at processing their own internal needs. They can regulate an entire household, but they cannot identify what they themselves are feeling. They can soothe everyone else's anxiety and have no idea how to soothe their own. And once you see that pattern, the cost becomes devastatingly visible, because the parentified child grows into an adult who cannot stop caretaking, not because they love it, because their nervous system has been programmed to interpret other people's needs as emergencies that require immediate response. Every relationship they enter activates the same circuit: scan for need, respond to need, suppress own need. They become the friend who is always available, the partner who manages everything, the colleague who picks up every slack, the person everyone leans on without ever asking whether the leaning hurts. And it does hurt, quietly, constantly, in a way they can't name because they've never been taught that their own pain counts. They lie in bed at night and feel a tiredness that sleep doesn't fix, because the tiredness isn't physical. It's the accumulated weight of decades of putting themselves last, of caring for everyone without ever being cared for in return, of being so competent that nobody thinks to check on them, of hearing "you're so strong" and wanting to scream, "I'm not strong, I'm exhausted, and nobody has asked me if I'm okay since I was 9 years old." The loneliest version of this is sitting in a room full of people you've helped, people you've held, people whose lives are better because of what you gave, and realizing that not one of them knows how heavy you are. Not because they don't care, but because you trained them not to see it. You trained everyone in your life to believe you don't need anything, and the training started when you were still a child. But here's what the parentified child actually became. And this is the part nobody ever says to them plainly enough. You were a child who looked around at a broken system, and instead of breaking with it, you held it together. Not because you were forced to, not because anyone handed you instructions, but because somewhere inside you, in a part of you that existed before you had words for it, there was a refusal to let the people you loved fall apart. That reflex was not dysfunction. It was love. Fierce, impossible, premature love. The kind that a child should never have to carry, but the kind that when they do carry it, reveals something extraordinary about who they are. You are not codependent. You are not a people pleaser. You are not too responsible. You are someone who learned to hold the world together when you were still small enough to need the world to hold you. And instead of becoming bitter, instead of shutting down, instead of turning hard, you became kind. You became the person who shows up, the person who notices, the person who carries. And the fact that you're still carrying, still showing up, still noticing, still caring, after all that weight, after all those years, after all the times nobody noticed what it cost you, that is not a weakness. That is one of the most extraordinary forms of human resilience that exists, and it deserves to be seen, not praised, not used, seen. The work now is not to stop caring. It's to learn, perhaps for the first time in your life, that you are allowed to be cared for too. Not earned, not after you've finished helping everyone else, not when you've finally proven you deserve it. Now, as you are, without doing a single thing for anyone. You were never supposed to carry that, but you did, and it didn't break you. That tells you everything you need to know about what you're made of. If this felt like someone just described the childhood you've never fully explained to anyone, the one that made you who you are, but cost you something you're still trying to name, you are not alone. Leave a comment about the moment you realized you were parenting your own parents. And if you want to keep understanding why you are the way you are, subscribe. You held everyone together. Now it's time to understand what that built inside you.